Roger and Garp will team up to defeat Xebec to end the God Valley incident, as far as we know at least. But the question is, why? Why would these two stand-up guys that we've grown to like and respect execute someone like Xebec, who's just basically trying to save his wife and son? Well, I think that they will defeat him because Xebec will need them to. Because I believe that Rox will become a full-on demon, Domi Reversi style, and Roger and Garp will be the ones to put him out of misery and also save and protect everyone else on the island. Now, I've been talking about this idea pretty much since we got confirmation that Rox has been a pretty decent man in general in his flashback. Sure, he's a bit of a rowdy pirate, but chapter 1159 made it very clear, I think, that he's an earnest person at his core and has a really good heart. He has strong Luffy vibes, I would even argue, and his overall goal was to raid the Holy Land and avenge the Davy clan by destroying Emu, but after his son Teach and Xebec's wife were taken hostage by the Celestial Dragons, he does admit that he doesn't care about anyone else on God Valley at this point, and I do think that funnily enough, includes himself. Now, obviously I'm not the first person to talk about this idea. These videos do take a while to produce. There have been some theories online, and even my good friend Sophie, aka Joy Girl, made a really amazing video breaking down the idea from her point of view, but I wanted to talk about this myself because I think that the idea is something I can really get behind, and it might happen in a very different way and have some very different implications than we all originally thought. Because not only do I think that it makes a ton of sense, and I do think there's some really good evidence for this, but honestly, just a ton of foreshadowing showing that Rox will give up everything in order to protect Teach and his wife, maybe even his own soul. Let's start with the very obvious part here, which is that the man was popularized as a monster, a demon, and just straight up the worst human being of all time by the world governments. He's also someone who casually, literally marched into the Holy Land by himself, single-handedly murdering a Marine Admiral and then threatening Emu to their face. In other words, I think this dude has earned a spot in like the top 5 most hated people on Emu's list, I think, and I don't think there's any other way to put it. He made the Celestial Dragons somehow hate him more than they already seem to in generally hate his clan. And while it seems like they didn't know that Xebec was actually a member of the Davy clan, he still got under their skin pretty damn well. Now, we also know at this point that the world government is more than happy to find some creative, fun, recreational alternative means to getting rid of their enemies besides just some boring way like killing them or imprisoning them. Yawn, right? The warlord system was designed to harness pirates to do their dirty work, and the Gorosei have already leveraged Harold into attacking Rox a couple of times before. I mean, the whole Egghead Island arc before Elbaf is built around how they specifically stuck a whole deal with Kuma to keep Bonnie alive and thus making use of him, in which they really did. I mean, they got a lot out of Kuma. Even in the modern era, Emu actively went to Elbaf right now and took the giant warrior pirates by force as a means of getting them on their side. So really think about it. If you were Emu here, you probably think the plan would be quite simple, right? Once it eventually becomes clear that Rox actually wants to save his kid and his wife and cares about them, why not get all of the revenge done in one fell, very effective swoop? That's why I think that Emu went to God Valley and used the Domi Reversi on Xebec and had him try to destroy all the pirates and I guess all the civilians on God Valley, because in theory it would have killed like 100 something birds with one stone, and that's a pretty good bargain on pirate deaths if I dare say so myself. And this idea also fits so well in the story. Again, to me it's being very clearly set up for quite a while now, and I do think it will explain so much about some weird lingering issues that I've been having with this flashback overall. But maybe most importantly, I do think it's narratively the perfect end to Xebec's story. Alright, but let's get into the setup here. How would Emu even do this? And what evidence exists that makes me think that this is exactly what will happen? And the biggest thing here is the so-called devoted blade of God, Manmeyer Gunko. I keep forgetting that we actually know her last name at this point, to be honest with you. Whenever I write a video, I'm like, oh yeah, she's a Manmeyer. But chapters 1159 and 1160 made sure I remembered it this time properly. I hope. Fingers crossed. We'll see. Anyhow, Gunko is a super peculiar character, like, in general, right? Being treated as almost a squire or holy knight in training during the God Valley incident in a weird way. She's not a full holy knight here, it seems, and it's made explicitly clear that during God Valley, she was not, because she did not join everyone in the super cool team photo that they have. She's got the title Devoted Blade of God also, which might just be what they call what is essentially a holy knight intern, maybe? But I personally think that this title has much more of a double meaning, because we know for a fact that Imu is directly tied to Gunko. Imu's personal guard is now Gunko, and Gunko just sort of hangs out in the flower room with Imu most of the time, kind of like a handmaiden. But you know, a handmaiden who I guess got like evil devil arrows that can slice, dice, pierce, and kind of mangle her enemies if she wants to. Heck, I'm pretty sure that she's the one who killed Cobra, honestly. She's bad, I won't lie. Most importantly here is that we do know that Gunko is a vessel of sorts for Imu, and Imu can cast the Domi Reversi through a possessed Gunko. And so after everything we've now seen go down on Elbaf, do you really think it's a coinkydink that Gunko is on God Valley now, and that the Celestial Dragons in 1160 are giving Gunko high praise for her talents, right? She would be an essential piece of the puzzle for possessing rocks with the Domi Reversi, as she would be what enables Imu to come, like, you know, by possessing her to God Valley. Then there's also the fact that Saturn knows that Teach is Xebec's son. Now technically that's not a fact. What we do know for 100% certain is that Saturn knows that Teach is a member of the Davy clan. Fib just a little bit here, but it's essentially a 99% fact based on how Saturn talks about Teach during Egghead Island, right? Remember that? You know, when Devon and Van Augur show up and touch Saturn's creepy and goopy spider leg, right? Saturn reveals that he knows about Teach's lineage and what's special about him, which in my mind leaves two options basically. Somehow it was revealed only to the world government that Teach is a member of the Davy clan that survived God Valley. Now, I really don't know how that would come up, since Teach hides his own identity with Marshall, right? So I really don't think that's what happens. So instead, what I do think is nearly confirmed to be the case is number two, that Teach was used as leverage against Xebec, and that's how Saturn learned the truth of Teach's lineage that way. In other words, there's a really good chance I think that he's known the truth about Blackbeard ever since that guy was a baby, and that would explain why Teach was allowed to be part of the Warlords too. I think the government thought they might be able to keep a little bit of a check on him to some degree, at least by this, and my guess is that they did this exact thing, but way worse to his daddy. And let's be honest here, it would be exactly the type of thing that the Celestial Dragons and Imu would be willing to do, right? Like, they literally did the same thing to Kuma. Despite him being a buccaneer, they struck a deal and took away his freedom and even his will, right, in exchange for Bonnie's life. There's a blueprint here. So what's to say they wouldn't use Teach as leverage to get Rocks to be their pawn again during the God Valley incident? Heck, maybe Luffy's biggest advantage against the world government is gonna be in the story that he's not a dad yet, right? That could be it. Now, Xebec was already willing to give everything up to save his family, and I do think that Imu would be more than glad to abuse that fact. As I see it, Rux is probably gonna become Demon Xebec as a, you know, sort of last-ditch effort to save his own family, which, if that happens, is gonna be like crazy dramatic and definitely gonna make me cry when I read that. We actually know that the Celestial Dragons do seem to keep their word, at least that was the case apparently with Bonnie, and so I kind of guess the same would probably be what happens with Rocks. After all, Dragon isn't gonna be around to save baby Teach, right? And that kid is in desperate need for some help right now. And dear old dad is on a mission against God to quite literally save Teach right now. It's like the most beautiful and tragic way to actually complete Rocks' crazy story as far as I can see at this point. And honestly, I kind of want it to happen also. Like, not in a twisted way, but in a storytelling way. You get what I'm saying, right? You get... Okay, just checking. Because at this point, Xebec has been almost this like mythical level figure, almost on the same level as Joy Boy or Nika in the story, and it's been kind of a breath of fresh air, honestly, that I've been freaking out over at every and each turn while this has been going on. Genuinely, I don't think there's been a single chapter since Rocks was properly revealed that I have not loved. That's how cool the guy is. He's raw, he's honest, he's badass, again, In a weird way, he reminds me more of Luffy than Roger himself, and as a result, he should also go out in a blaze of glory, I think. For years, I've now theorized tons of things about him. His consciousness could still be in Teach, he might be alive as the man marked by flames, he's a statue on Thriller Bark, or quite literally like 10 other ways he might still be alive. I mean, the frozen guy in Impel Down is a fun one, right? But if I'm gonna be real with you guys, after seeing his story unfold now over the last couple of chapters, I kind of want him to become a demon and then get slain on God Valley. Because I feel sometimes with a character, you almost need their story to end the right way for them to be cemented as a total anime legend. You know what I mean, right? Like, going out in a blaze of glory like that would be a great way to make him immortal. It's sort of like Pain or Itachi Naruto, right? Or better yet, Whitebeard and Ace for One Piece. They're characters that have a complete crazy good character arc that ends in a truly heart-wrenching way and thus became so memorable. Again, I will literally cry if Rox becomes a demon to save his son and his wife, and I should cry. That's like the type of character that Oda has been building up here, I think. It's kind of like just like Kuma, but on steroids. Like, we didn't know a ton about Kuma, and his backstory turned him into a mega fan favorite immediately that went completely viral for his Nika dance across the entire world, but Xebec? We've been knowing about Xebec having some epic lore for many years now. We've wanted to know who he was, his powers, and his story for literal years now. By the way, we still don't really know much about his powers, I just realized. We're probably gonna get it. And this itch has now mostly been scratched, I think, and while I do totally hope that someday we get a Rocks Pirate spin-off story that reveals all their dirty fun secrets, I do want to see this character's end done justice. And one way that Oda can do that, I think, is by giving him a soul-crushing death that's super tragic and makes him a true One Piece legend and one of the top parents in the story too, dying for their family. Also, dude, to make a totally different point quickly that stays on topic, I think he literally has to become a demon or something else crazy needs to happen, or else Garp and Roger's legacies, in my eyes, are gonna be absolutely destroyed. Like, seriously, I've been having a blast with this flashback, seeing all these prime goats duking it out, being goofy, and almost seeing a return to form for Oda's pirate antics. You know, watching the Rocks crew and the Roger pirates during the flashback has kind of reminded me a lot of pre-timeskip One Piece in a lot of great ways. No crazy technology, no sun gods, not a 200 chapter mega arc, just Roger being a goofy dude who, you know, sims for a total baddie and gets beaten up a bunch by his enemies and his crew alike. And then on the flip side, we've got Garp, who literally screams, "I'm here, baby," right as he makes landfall, throwing cannonballs at everyone and their moms on the island. It's kind of pretty awesome. It's genuinely been super funny, and I really have loved every single second of it, except for one key part. If you watch my videos, you probably know what I'm gonna say, but after seeing the literal nightmare that is God Valley, why on earth did they team up with the government effectively to take down Rocks? Seriously, since the Kuma flashback, I've been tossing and turning in bed every single night trying to figure out why my boys here ended up defending the evil villains. Assuming that Sengoku didn't lie back in chapter 957, which, I mean, who knows how reliable he is, and Roger did team up with Garp to take down Rocks on God Valley, there needs to be a really good reason they did so, because if they just both decided to dab each other up and destroy Rocks, a man who's just literally trying to save his innocent child and mother from the slaughter there, then Roger and Garp would be truly disgusting people. In theory, these two would be defending the Celestial Dragons who are hosting all the crazy stuff going on there. You know, the people who slaughter children, toyed with their prey, that they're using humans as slaves and trophy wives and all that stuff. I cannot imagine a world where Oda actually makes Roger and Garp defend them for the hell of it, since he has quite literally spent over 1,000 chapters building them up to be like the baddest guys on the block. Hey, but you know what else is pretty cool on the block? Joining the Ohara Patreon. It's fun, we've got some sick perks, and I think you'd really like what we've got cooking over there. Check it out, and if it's not your speed, no worries, it's just a big help when it comes to creating clean, consistent content for you guys. And we even have a weekly free newsletter if you just want to have something free and be updated with everything that's going on in the story, anime, you know, the live action, whatnot. All right. with that, back to the fun part here. Garp and Roger are not bad people, right? We've never seen them do anything really bad, and Oda doesn't write them to be bad people. Just the opposite. At worst, Garp is morally a little bit gray, which is what originally led me to the Demon Xebec idea to begin with, because it would be the perfect reason that Garp and Roger would team up to take down Xebec now that we've seen everything that's unfolded so far. I think it would make a ton of sense if Xebec let Imu take over his body and mind with the Domi Reversi so that he can save his son Teach, but I do think it probably was much easier for him to do so because he knew that Roger and Garp were there to take him down and protect everyone from him going rampage. I kind of like to think about it how Sanji, you know, made Zoro promise to take him out during Wano if the Germa genes inside him went haywire. And in a way, I kind of get it, honestly. It'd be definitely way easier to sell your soul to the devil when you know that some of your, I'm not sure if friends is the right word, right? But fellow spirited people and powerhouses are there to take care of things if you go out of control. Xebec himself was very nervous and frustrated at the end of chapter 1160 when Garp showed up. He was like visibly nervous that this mission was about to get a whole lot more difficult when Prime D-Goat Garp himself made landfall, and genuinely reading back the chapters, I think it's been foreshadowed a whole bunch, and honestly, I probably missed it because it was so invested in all the other crazy hype reveals that went on that I didn't sink my teeth into the more subtle dialogue that was actually happening, you know, looking back just one or two more chapters. Like, for example, we do know that Xebec really respects Garp because of how he talks about him in chapter 1157 here. He thinks that Garp should have been a pirate, he knows that Garp hates the world nobles, and he laughs about him with Herald over drinks. And on the flip side, we also know that Roger and Xebec had a nasty rivalry, yes, but it never resulted in either of them getting killed by the other. It was more like a friendly, we're gonna beat each other up pretty bad. The same thing that Roger and Whitebeard had going on later as well. And the next chapter, 1158, shows that off immediately when Roger bursts into Shaki's bar and gets up and rocks his face, the same way that I guess like Luffy and Kid maybe would interact, right? They're bitter rivals, but that doesn't mean that they want each other dead. In fact, now that I think about it, nothing ever alludes to the fact that either of them like killing or defeating pirates that way. Rock's this entire flashback is brutal, but not really lethal unless you're a Marine. He even recruits his crew by the Davy Back fights, kind of like stealing people in funny games. Instead of, you know, just murdering the other pirate crews or something else that you could do, he is absolutely cutthroat, yes, but outside of the very beginning of the flashback when we heard that, you know, he killed a Marine admiral or that he injured one very severely, we haven't seen Garp, Roger, or Xebec take someone else's life, really. But I do think that all of that fun and games is gonna come to an end very soon when Xebec needs to be stopped and killed. I've always wondered if these three had some deeper history that connected them, something that I've actually explored in my All D-Clan crew What If, or like a video here where I talked about were they childhood friends that then went separate ways. But now that I see them on the pages together, I really am feeling like this idea might have some truth to it, right? Like, it would be super sick to find out that Roger, Garp, and Xebec had a similar dynamic to Luffy, Ace, and Sabo, but it kind of went south once Garp became a Marine and Roger and Xebec had some sort of falling out. But regardless, the bigger thing that matters is that they're all united by one thing, the D-Clan. Yeah, the middle initial unites all three of them, and I think that if Xebec becomes a raging demon, he'd only do it because he knows that Roger and Garp are the kinds of people who would set their differences aside to defeat Xebec and save him from Imu's dark magic and, you know, kind of everyone else on the island. So we could get arguably the most beautiful, sad, and like epic moment ever with Xebec's death. And also, Oda can salvage Garp and Roger's legacies by having them do it for Xebec and not against Xebec for the Celestial Dragons or some crazy stuff, right? Because, come on, do you really think that Oda would let Roger and Garp just kill some poor dude who's trying to save his family? That would be literally the most insane choice and make no freaking sense. But now I want to kind of soft pivot over to something that I really think brings this all home for me, and it's something that Sophie actually also brought up in her video, and it is something I very much can resonate with. Because the biggest thing in my mind that narratively sets all this up in the arc is the flashback this is happening in. There's a reason that Oda chose to show us this flashback during Elbaf. This isn't Rox's flashback, it's Loki's flashback about his father, Harold. This was supposed to show us the steps that led Harold to his unfortunate demise. You know, the thing that eventually causes him to get killed. Harold chose not to help Xebec. He chose not to go to God Valley and take down the Holy Knights alongside his friends. In other words, Xebec kinda needs to die on this island at the hands of the world government for the sake of the story. My guess is that Oda's writing Harold as a man who lived with many regrets, all as he tried to balance being the king of Elbaf. He wanted to save his people and thought that joining the world government would help make that come true. That's why he tried to kill Rox during chapter 1158. He was given an ultimatum by the Gorosei and he picked his people over his friends. Not only does this perfectly showcase Imo and the Gorosei yet again manipulating their enemies to defeat each other, but from a story perspective, it's setting up Xebec's eventual turn as well, I think. In this fight, he literally is screaming to Harold about how he's being manipulated, how this is what the world government does, and how Harold and his people will become slaves, toys, and pawns in their war. And just to show you, Xebec here very specifically says, "Where has your free will gone to, Harold?" This is like the perfect way to set up Xebec falling victim to this very exact thing in the very near future, and it's because Harold did not come and help him at God Valley. Xebec, of course, tried one last time to convince Harold to come with him and wipe out the injustices of the world government at God Valley, but instead, Harold cut him off and tried to stop him. Harold admitted that Xebec telling him that his child and wife were on God Valley was an exploitable weakness, and even more interestingly, Harold does point out that the government is watching them too. Now, to be totally honest with you, Harold could be the reason that Teach even was used as leverage. I mean, Harold might have quite literally told the Gorosei that Xebec's child was on the island, and that will totally change how I will look at him going forward if that turned out to be true. I kind of hope not. Ideally, it would have just happened through some sort of espionage where the world government planted a transponder or had someone hiding that heard Xebec talk about his kid, or maybe it was a Choku or someone who, you know, I don't know, like betrayed the Rocks pirates. Either way, it does seem that grief and regret are something that Harold is gonna have a lot of after God Valley, and that he eventually will suffer the same fate as Xebec because he didn't side with his old friends. That would also explain perfectly why Loki would blame Harold for Xebec's death, not because he killed him, but because his father refused to side with the correct side of history and bent the knee to the government. And of course, how ironic would it be if both Xebec and Harold's stories came to such a similar end? They both would die at the hands of the world government because Harold refused to side with Xebec, and Xebec wasn't able to complete his plan that relied on Harold's. Remember, Xebec really only thought he'd be able to destroy the Holy Land with Harold's help and 2 key devil fruits, presumably the Nika fruit and something else, and this entire flashback, the events of God Valley and Harold's death, would set up for now Loki and Luffy to hopefully fix the mistakes of their past, team up, and finally defeat Emu together. And then of course it will open up a whole new can of worms for whatever Blackbeard has in store, right? But God Valley is far from over and there's so much still to talk about. What are all the prizes? Who does what? Why is Dragon suddenly taking center stage? Well, I talk very long about God Valley and why I think it's the best thing that Oda has ever written in this very long video right here. Grab a coffee or wash the dishes or clean the kitchen while I give you over an hour's worth of God Valley right here. And yeah, otherwise, thanks for watching and thanks to all of our Patreons. And I will see you in the next video on Sunday. And boy, is that one gonna be crazy. You don't wanna miss that one.